Welcome to my book review of Kwaidan, a book written by Lafcadio Hearn. Lafcadio Hearn has an Irish father, or had, I'd say, he died like a long time ago. He had an Irish father and a Greek mother, and that might explain his somewhat strange name. Hearn sounds Irish, and Lafcadio somewhat Greek. He's mostly known for his writings about Japanese stories, and he lived from 1850 to 1904. He died over 100 years ago, and he left the US where he lived to Japan in 1890. So he had a good 14 years of living in Japan and studying Japanese things and writing books there. So this book, Kwaidan, I bought this book based on the cover, and I know what you're thinking. One shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I did. I bought it. I wanted to read like some horror stories actually. I'll make a picture and put the cover in the video so you can judge for yourself, but it looks like it's a horror story. It says as a subtitle, Stories and Studies of Strange Things. Well, to be upfront and blunt about it, I didn't really like this book that much, and I think both the cover and the undertitle are a bit misleading. It says Stories and Studies of Strange Things. So, okay, there are a lot of stories. There are very short stories, like 3-4 pages a piece, and there are studies, so that's correct. But the studies, they're in the back. There are only 3 studies in this book, and these concern insects. And I don't consider insects strange things actually. So it's about butterflies, mosquitoes and ants. But I'll get to that later. So I bought this book based on the cover. I wanted to read some horror stories from the 19th century. I'm sure in other videos I'll get to the point where I explain why I like the 19th century, like the second half especially, best for fiction. But for now, I want to shortly discuss like the short stories he has written. There are a lot of them, as I said. They're very short. I have to say I didn't get most of them, and I know people will read this book to maybe get like an idea of what kind of fiction stories there are in Japan. One should expect not to understand these stories because they are based on ancient, or at least like stories from Japanese culture, and as a Westerner you really wouldn't understand most of it, and it refers to a lot of things particular to the Japanese culture, and there are a lot of footnotes. But even regarding the fact that as a Westerner reader of this book, I didn't even get where these stories were going for, what the morale was, or what Hearn was trying to do with these stories. I'll just retell one of them quickly. They're very short. So the one story I remember the best is about a poor Japanese blind guy. This blind guy is really good at playing like an instrument and reciting a battle took place like in medieval times in Japan. So that's his one skill, and at one time he encounters a priest and he plays this song and he recites the history of the battle, and this priest is so interested or so captivated by the skillful display that he actually offers the man to stay in his temple. So he was basically like a homeless guy wandering around, so he gladly accepts, and then he lives like happily in the temple. But at one night he's alone in the temple because this other priest, he left and everyone is like gone, and he's alone, and he's sitting like on the veranda, and he's just playing his instrument and thinking to himself. And so remember, he's blind, so at one point someone comes up to him and he don't know who it is, and this person says that he has to come with him. He says he's a samurai. That word has it that he can recite this battle, and this battle actually took place in the 15th century or something, and that his lord, the lord of the samurai, wants to hear this skillful display on the instrument. Okay, so this priest, he follows him, and they have to walk like a long way, and then they get to so this is written from the perspective of blind guy, so he doesn't really know where they're going. But at some point he hears like voices, and he assumes like he's with this lord, and the samurai says, well, now please play your song and try to please his lord, right? Don't waste his time. He plays the song, and everyone, there are a lot of people there, is really in awe of him. But at the point where he talks or he sings about the losses in the battle and the hardship of the people who died at the battle, the people become like, well, not outraged, but they become like very emotional, as if it concerns them directly. But then when he gets to the end of the story, everyone's really pleased and everyone's really happy, and the Lord is in awe. He demands basically that he comes back like every evening, but he cannot tell anyone about it. Well, maybe you will think, why doesn't he just refuse? But this is written like in the time of the samurai, and one doesn't simply refuse samurai or lords of samurai, the shogun. So there's no real choice, right? So he has to come back, and he has to keep his mouth shut about this. This first night, no one notices he left the temple, because everyone were gone themselves. But the next night they do notice that he's gone, and they ask him, where are you going? Like he was going at night, right, in the dark, and he's blind, so the dark doesn't really matter. But yeah, if you go out alone and no other people are like out, and you're blind, then something happens. So it's kind of strange thing to do for a blind person. So they become like a bit worried about him, the priest that is of the temple where he lives, and they say, well, where are you going? If you want to go somewhere, we can like send this boy to follow you, and we'll make sure nothing bad happens to you. But he keeps his word, and he doesn't tell anything about it. So the next night, the same things happens again, but then the priest had someone like keep an eye on him. So someone follows him, and they see, and now the story is being told from the perspective of the person following him, where he actually is going, and he's not going to a temple or to a samurai castle or whatever. He's actually going to a cemetery, and there he is alone. So he's not really following a samurai, but he's alone, and he's playing like this song in a graveyard. And of course, this is the graveyard where the people are buried of the battle, of the song he's like reciting. Of course, they are like really upset, and they think he's bewitched. And that's the thing about this book from Lafcadio Hearn. There are a lot of like superstitious things going on, and everyone in the story, in every one of these stories, goes along with it. So they talk about goblins, or they talk about like these specific things from Japanese lore, or history, or I'm not sure what to call it. It's fiction, but everyone knows about these like goblins, like things we have in the West too. That's the consensus at this point. Like he somehow is like bewitched by some evil spirit, and they have to cleanse him. They bring him back to the temple to tell him what happened, and the priest says to our protagonist that the only way to cleanse him from this evil spirit is to write down like sutras or like verses on his body, to paint it like on his body, and that he has to sit on the veranda, and when the samurai, the evil ghost samurai, comes to take him to the cemetery, that he just has to sit there like meditating and not respond, and just wait until it goes over, like the entire night, and then the evil spirits will leave him alone. That's the only way. He doesn't have a choice again, so the priest paints his body with these verses, and the next night he's sitting on the veranda, and the samurai comes again. He's like shouting to him, like he's shouting his name, standing for him, like, you have to come with me, you have to go now, and the Lord is waiting, and you better not like make him mad at you, and this will happen. But then suddenly apparently the samurai cannot see this man anymore, and he's talking about these ears, like there were like ears floating around us or something. The samurai is getting angry, he gets out his katana and he cuts off these ears, and then he leaves. Our main character, Hochi is his name. I just realized I didn't call his name up until now. Okay, but Hochi, so he's bleeding, but he still is sitting and he still is meditating up until dawn when the priest comes back, because he wants to make sure the evil spirit actually leaves. So the next morning, the priest and the other people from the temple, they check on Hochi and how he's doing, and they see how that he's wounded and what happened to him. Well, of course they take care of him, and then the priest says what happened. He actually forgot, or he put up one of his other pupils to do the painting for him, and they forgot about his ears. They also had to write the verses on his ears, and they forgot about that. So when the evil spirit samurai the last evening checked on Hochi, they saw only his ears floating and getting angry because he didn't want to tell them about this ancient battle anymore. He took out his anger on the ears, and now he's not only blind but also deaf. And that's basically is the story. It does tell that in the later years he still recites the battle even though he's without the ears, and that's actually how he became even more well known than he already was. Everyone knew about Hochi the earless, and they call it Mimi Nashi Hochi, if you want to know it. So I'll read this last part of the story. With the aid of the good doctor, Hochi soon recovered from his injuries. The story of his strange adventure spread far and wide, and soon made him famous. Many noble persons went to Akamakazaki to hear him recite, and large presents of money were given to him, so that he became a wealthy man. But from time of his adventure, he was known only by the appellation of the Mimi Nashi Hochi, Hochi the earless. And so that's basically one of the stories, and I thought this was actually the best one. It's actually also the first one in the book, so at this point I thought, well, it really wasn't scary, but was somewhat scary. You imagine this blind guy sitting alone in the dark at a graveyard playing a song. That's somewhat scary. And this evil, well, they were actually not evil, they were just spirits, are demanding that he, this mortal, sacrifices his time and actually his life to tell about something that happened years and years and years ago. So that was kind of scary. So I actually did like this story. I think it's a pretty good example of the other stories too. And one of the things I want to point out is that in most Western horror stories, it's mostly the protagonist who is dealing with something evil or something strange or something horrific, and the other characters in the story mostly don't know about this horror or this thing that's going on, and they either don't believe it, or at one point they're dragged in it themselves, or they're outsiders from it. But in this book it's none of that. It's Hochi is the main character, and he encounters the evil samurai, and even though the other people don't see him, they actually tell him what's happening, and there's immediate consensus. There's no mystery going on, how can this be? What is this evil spirit? People might misunderstand this critique, because this might actually be a difference in the East and the West, or Japanese fiction, but these goblins and spirits and whatever. The point is that they take place a long while back, where people actually were superstitious. So this is actually closer to the truth than any Western horror story. But the downside to that is that these stories actually aren't scary at all, and they're more like the Brothers Grimm, fairy tales. This one was it wasn't scary at all, but this one was the scariest of them all. And from here it became a fairy tale book, with a lot of morale, but strange samurai morale. I think Hearn was really into samurai, and he also writes a lot about pretty young women. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know, I was taken aback by the stories that followed. So let's see if I can find another story I can tell about. Oh yeah, we have a story about Ricky the Fool, a young man about 18 who had a mental age of 2, and then one day he dies and no one really remembers him. And yeah, you can judge by the way I'm telling this that I really didn't get what this story was about. Let's see if I can find a better one. Oh yeah, what's also kind of funny is I think in 3 or 4 stories at one point something strange happens, or someone dies, like a relative, and then the main character is basically stated in one sentence, they shave his head and become a priest. That's like what happens. Like, so maybe you like imagine you invested all your money in bitcoins and then you check the course and see it went down like 100%, or you lost all your money. Imagine then someone reciting your song and say, well, you checked the bitcoin course, he saw that it went down and he lost all his savings, so he shaved his head and become a priest. Something like that. It isn't meant to be funny, but it was funny to me. So I'll recite one of the parts where that happens here. Quote, with another cry of pain, she turned aside her beautiful head and tried to hide her face behind her sleeve. But almost in the same moment, her whole form appeared to collapse in the strangest way and to sink down the level with the floor. Tomotada had sprung to support her, but there was nothing to support. There lay on the matting only the empty robes of the fair creature and the ornaments that she had worn in her hair. The body had ceased to exist. Tomotada shaved his head, took the Buddhist vows, and became an itinerant priest. He traveled to all the provinces of the empire, and at all holy places which he visited, he offered prayers for the soul of Ayogagi. So that's basically what happens. Like, someone encounters something strange, someone disappears, someone dies. In that case, you have to take up the vows and become a priest. So basically about this book, it's not that I think it's badly written, it's just that I don't understand the stories. There's no like clue, or like there's no real punch to it. If I would compare this to another famous Japanese writer like Ryu-Kishin Akutagawa, he is the master of short stories. If you compare his work to this, well, maybe it's because I'm Western, but there's a lot more oomph to the stories of Akutagawa. These stories are like, they have a point, and even for Western readers it's understandable what's going on. But it's Kwaidan, it's not really stories and studies of strange things, but strange stories and studies, and things. So, okay, I didn't regret reading it. I think I might reread it later on, or I think you actually get more out of it if you actually do study Japanese lore. I keep calling it lore. I know it's a bit condescending to call it like that. It's not like some internet thing. I have to find out the right word for that. Okay, I'm just quickly looking if I can find another story. Okay, well, there's another story about a bell, and this is a bell in a Buddhist temple, so one you can ring, just like a Christian, or a bell in a Christian church. And it was kind of funny. It's like a story about karma, I think. At one point there's a temple and they want to create a bell, but they need like the metals to make this bell. And the priests go out and ask the peasants to donate their watches or their mirrors or everything that's made of metal, so they can melt it and make this bell. So there's this girl in this book. Let's see if I can find her name. Amida, I think. Let's see. Why is it so hard to find the name of this girl in this book? Nah, I'm not sure. I will just call her Amida. So Amida is this young girl. She has this mirror. She donates the mirror to the temple, and it ends up in a pile of all the metal stuff that's donated to the temple. But she regrets it like almost immediately. But once given, you cannot just take back something from the temple. That's like theft. She regrets it because she realizes she gave away an heirloom. This mirror she gave was from her mother, and her mother's mother, and her mother's mother's mother, and yeah, we've all seen Monty Python, of course. I'll just stop there. And then in this book, Well, I'll just read it, quote, "She thought about the old saying that a mirror is the soul of a woman, a saying mystically expressed by the Chinese character for soul upon the backs of many bronze mirrors, and she feared that it was true in weirder ways than she had before imagined, but she could not dare to speak of her pain to anybody," unquote. She basically wants to take back the mirror, but she knows she can't, so she wants to raise like money to buy back a mirror from the temple. Well, that doesn't happen. She doesn't have any money because she's poor. And then she's ashamed. She's ashamed because people get to know, because she's trying to raise money, they're asking like, why does this peasant woman need money? Like, these stories play in a time where money actually isn't like the most important thing to have, right? Because you have like food, you have farmers, so what does she need money for, right? So they become suspicious of her, and then they realize when they just ask her, like, or the people will obviously ask like, what do you need money for, when it's not like, yeah, easy to understand for them. So they come to know she wants to buy back the mirror. She becomes ashamed that people know about this, because she's like attaching so much value to something so like a mirror. And as I just read, a mirror reflects the soul of a woman. So somehow a woman who wants to see her own reflection, if that's the soul of the woman, then it's, well, narcissistic basically, right? So that's why she becomes ashamed. It's not said like this, Luke. This is how I interpret it. And then she drowns herself because she's ashamed. But before she drowns, she tells these words. She says, "When I am dead, it will not be difficult to melt the mirror and to cause the bell. But the person who breaks the bell by ringing it, great wealth will be given by the ghost of me." This is also something that, unquote, sorry. This is also a thing that happens regularly. Like when you're dying or you're about to die, you have some power to grant like wishes from the afterlife. This happened in another story too in this book. So she says that, and of course a lot of people after that try to break the bell by ringing it. So this is kind of funny too. Like this is more like comedy than horror actually. So a lot of people go to the temple and they start ringing the bell, and of course it's a big nuisance to everyone, and especially the priests in the temple. And the bell, well, it was like well made, so it doesn't break, of course, by ringing it. That's what it's supposed to do. So the priests get like sick of it, and they just roll the bell into a swamp to get rid of it. After the bell had been rolled into the swamp, there was of course no more chance of ringing it in such a wise as to break it. But the persons who regretted this loss of opportunity would strike and break objects imaginatively substituted for the bell, thus hoping to please the spirit of the owner of the mirror that had made so much trouble. One of these persons was a woman called Umage, famed in Japanese legend because of relation to Kajiwara Kageshu, a warrior of the Heike clan. While the pair were traveling together, Kajiwara one day found himself in great straits for want of money, and Umage, remembering the tradition of the bell of Mugen, took a basin of bronze, and mentally representing it to be the bell, beat upon it until she broke it, crying out at the same time for 300 pieces of gold. A guest of the inn where the pair was stopping made inquiry as to the cause of the begging and the crying, and on learning the story of the trouble, actually presented Umege with 300 ryo, like yen, in gold. Well, it's not the same in yen, but it's the valuta. Afterwards, a song was made for Umege's basin of bronze, and that song is sung by dancing girls even to this day. Umage no Shushibachi tateteya, okane ga deru naraba, mina san mikue wo sore tano mimasu. Yeah, so this is like I say, it's more like comedy than horror or mystery. It's like the origin of these superstitious beliefs, and this is like from one thing or one event they fall into another. So first you have the girl who donates like, so actually does something good, I think. She donates a mirror to make the bell for the temple. Then she regrets it and she dies of shame, and this gives spring to a legend that you can get rich by breaking the bell. And then there's a story written about a person who breaks not the actual bell, but like a token for the bell, and needs money, and there's no like divine intervention, like spiritual ghost giving money, but it's actually like a guy who hears about the story. So the story becomes like true, not because of supernatural events, but more that people believe in it. So people believe in the story, and that makes it true. So that was one story, and I just remember one other, and it was about someone who was sentenced to death, and the samurai was to cut off the head of this person who was sentenced to death. But because this person was about to die, he was very, not nervous. Well, of course you might be nervous when you're about to face the gallows, but no, he was not nervous. He was like full of resentment, and he was like shouting at everyone, and he was angry, and he thought he didn't deserve it. And the people who were like came to see the execution, they were afraid, because if you kill someone who's full of resentment, then you create like an evil spirit that has the power to do like terrible things, that to haunt them or something like that. So the samurai who's about to cut off his head, he makes up this scheme. Basically, he says, when I cut off your head, I bet you cannot bite down on the sidewalk, right, with your teeth. And this man says, well, I can. And he sees it like a bet. So then the samurai cuts off his head, the head falls, and he actually bites down with his teeth upon the sidewalk. So he proves that even in death he has this power. And then people will think, oh, yeah, the first reaction of the people is they're afraid, because they actually think he does have afterlife powers. But then the samurai says they do not have to worry, because at the point of his death, of this guy whose head was cut off, he wasn't full of resentment anymore. He was full of accomplishment, because he accomplished something that he took a bet upon to prove himself. So he actually died happy. So this ghost doesn't have any power anymore. I'll see you. I'm really laughing about these stories. I actually think they're quite good, and now I'm telling about them, I see more meaning to them than I first read them. So, okay, maybe I started this one. I don't want to call it a review. Maybe I started out this talk, a bit negative, but I think I actually like this story. So that's kind of strange. Strange things happen when you read this. So I actually do recommend this. And of course, I did say I like Akutagawa stories better, but there's no reason for you not to read this and Akutagawa. So thank you all for listening. So the book is Kwaidan, and the writer is Lafcadio Hearn.